wicked little listeners, settle in. Tonight's chapter arrives with the perfume of blood, fear, and the kind of consequences polite society refuses to acknowledge over supper. The scandalous hours may have passed, but now comes the reckoning. And believe me, the bill is steep. Hawksmere's heroes have dragged themselves back through the postern gate looking like they clawed their way out of the grave, and perhaps something reached back to claw at them. Poisoned springs sealed shut, men dead in the dark, and an ancient glow that absolutely was not part of God's plan. Honestly, darlings, even I had to clutch my pearls. And as for Tom and Bess, oh, their situation has ripened into a tragedy so exquisite, so deliciously grotesque, you'll almost feel guilty enjoying it. Almost. Sir Jocelyn has them under his elegant little boot, and the man interrogates with the precision of a surgeon and the soul of a wolf. If ever there was a moment where a maid's last secret could topple a kingdom, this is it. So breathe deep, my loves. Chapter 28 is about to show us exactly what water costs, when that water runs thick with sin.
Chapter 28, The Price of Water. The night had birthed monsters, not the fantastical beasts of minstrel tales, but real ones fashioned from ambition, poison, and a light that defied the laws of God and nature. As the echoes of the Mowbray horns faded into the east, a new, more profound silence fell over Hawksmere, a silence of held breath and waiting terror. The scandalous hours were over, but the accounting for them had just begun. The dawn would not bring relief, only a clearer view of the cost. The return of the wounded. The postern gate, a mere slit in the keep's massive flank, creaked open just enough to admit 3 shapes stumbling from the darkness. They were specters of mud and blood, their breaths coming in ragged, steaming gasps that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the silent night. Eamon half-carried Will, whose youthful face was now a mask of shock and pain, his leg dragging uselessly. A deep gash on his thigh, hastily bound with a strip of tunic, seeped a dark, ominous red. Lenn brought up the rear, his eyes wild, constantly glancing back into the impenetrable blackness, as if expecting it to reach out and reclaim them. He held a broken pickaxe like a talisman, his knuckles white. They collapsed just inside the gate, into the small frozen yard of the lower bailey. The 2 guards who had admitted them, men who had faced down Mowbray steel, recoiled at the sight. It wasn't just the wounds, the mud, or the blood. It was the something else that clung to them, a palpable aura of dread that seemed to leak from their pores, a coldness that had nothing to do with the winter air. They smelled of wet stone, iron, and something else, something ancient and deeply wrong. Alianor was there in moments, her own vigil on the walls ending in this frantic dash downwards. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, a painful counterpoint to the deathly stillness. She fell to her knees on the frozen cobbles beside Eamon, her hands fluttering over the gash on his arm, the fresh blood soaking his tunic, the terrifying pallor of his face beneath the grime. "Eamon," she breathed, her voice cracking, the single word carrying the weight of all her fear for him. His wintry eyes, usually so clear and certain, were clouded with pain and something else, a haunted, distant shadow, as if he were still staring into the abyss that had stared back. He caught her searching hand, his grip weak but urgent, his fingers cold as the grave. "The water. It's sealed," he rasped, each word an effort. "The channel is blocked. The poison is cut off from the well." A sob of relief caught in Alianor's throat, but it died there, strangled by the look of grim foreboding that passed between Eamon and Lenn. This was not the face of victory. "But," she prompted, her voice hardening into the tone of the Lady of Hawksmere, the commander who needed facts, not feelings. "The men who found us, they're dead," Lenn said, his voice a low, shaky rumble. He wouldn't meet her eyes, staring instead at the broken pick in his hands. "We had no choice. It was them or us, in the dark. But that's not the worst of it, my lady. Not by a league." Eamon's gaze held hers, and in its gray depths, she saw the lingering reflection of that unnatural green light. "There's something in the rock, Alianor. he whispered, the intimacy of his use of her name making the confession all the more terrifying. Something old. Edmund wasn't mad. He was a prophet. Roland didn't just poison the spring. He tapped into it, woke it. When we broke the rock to divert the water, it answered. He described it in terse, chilling sentences that painted a nightmare in the cold air. The deep subsonic thrum that vibrated in their teeth and bones, not their ears. The way the torches of the fallen soldiers had guttered and died simultaneously, as if snuffed by a giant, unseen breath. The sickly, pulsing phosphorescence that had bloomed from the very fissure they had created, illuminating the cavern in a hellish, silent glow. Will, huddled on the ground and clutching his leg, began to weep silently, great heaving sobs that shook his entire frame. It looked at us, he whimpered, his voice that of a lost child. From the deep down dark, it looked. It knew we were there. A cold that had nothing to do with the winter night seeped into Alianor's soul, freezing the ember of relief into a shard of ice. This was beyond her understanding, beyond any strategy she had ever conceived. A tyrant she could fight, a siege she could withstand, but the earth itself turning against them? It was a primal fear that could unravel the fragile courage of her people faster than any army, a poison for the mind far more potent than arsenic. Her mind, however, was a general's mind, forged in a crucible of impossible choices. She could not afford to succumb, not to show a single crack. Superstition was a weapon, and she had to seize it before it was used against her. We deal with what we can see and touch, she said, her voice gaining a steely, unwavering composure that belied the terror, coiling like a serpent in her gut. She turned to the guards, her commands crisp and clear. Take Will to the infirmary. Find whatever poultices and herbs remain. Do not let the wound fester. Lenn, get to the hall. Get hot food and a stiff drink into you. You have done Hawksmere a service that can never be repaid. Your courage will be remembered. She then looked at Eamon, her eyes softening for a fraction of a second, a silent communication passing between them. And you come with me. Clement needs to see to that arm properly. You cannot afford to lose it. As the men were led away, Will crying out as his leg was jostled, she helped Eamon to his feet, his significant weight leaning into her slight frame. It was not just a physical support. It was a merging of their burdens, a silent vow. He had faced the physical, unknowable horror in the dark. She now had to face the political and spiritual one in the coming light. The captives, in Sir Jocelyn de Mowbray's campaign tent, a world away from the primitive, earthy fear of the cavern, a different kind of horror was unfolding. It was a horror of polished steel, fine wool, and cold, calculating intelligence. Here, fear was not a specter in the dark, but a tool, meticulously applied. Tom and Bess knelt on the frozen ground, their hands bound tightly behind their backs. The coarse rope chafed their wrists, a small constant pain amidst the overwhelming dread. The tent was Spartan, but exuded an air of unassailable authority. Parchment maps of Hawksmere and the surrounding fiefs were weighted down by expensive daggers. A brass brazier glowed with a heap of hot coals, casting long, dancing shadows, and Sir Jocelyn sat on a folding campaign chair, regarding them as a scholar might regard two interesting but ultimately insignificant specimens. He had not yelled. He had not threatened them with immediate violence. He had simply dissected their story, layer by layer, until only the raw, pathetic truth remained. A lay sister of Furness, Jocelyn mused, steepling his fingers, his voice calm and conversational. Yet you cannot recall the name of the abbot who holds your vows. You flee a fiery death, yet you carry no rosary, no cross, no psalter. Your hands, he gestured with a languid wave towards Bess's bound wrists, are soft but calloused from needlework and the stirring of pots, not from scrubbing cloister floors or hauling water. These are the hands of a lady's maid, the hands of someone who knows the secrets of the lady's chamber, not the divine office. Bess kept her head down, her hood shadowing her face, but she could feel his gaze like a physical weight. Her heart hammered against her ribs so violently she was sure he could see the fabric of her habit tremble. The carved sparrow, hidden in her bodice, felt like a brand against her skin, a tiny, desperate piece of Alianor that she had failed to protect. Jocelyn's gaze, cold and analytical, shifted to Tom. And you have the bearing of a man used to command, to managing stores and men, not to following orders in blind faith. You look me in the eye when you lie. That takes a particular kind of courage or foolishness, a man of conviction, loyal to a fault. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more terrifying than a shout. Tell me, steward, did you truly believe such a transparent ruse would work? That I, who has parsed the complex laws of inheritance and debated theology with bishops, would be taken in by a pantomime? That I would commit my entire force to chasing a phantom nun through the woods, while the real threat, the outlaw, the miner, the blight, scurried through a hole in the ground like the vermin he is? Tom said nothing, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. The man's calm dissection was more brutal than any beating. He had failed his lady. The knowledge was a poison in his veins, more bitter than the spring water. Jocelyn smiled, a thin, bloodless expression that did not reach his eyes. He stood and walked gracefully to the brazier, picking up the iron rod used for stirring the coals. He did not brandish it as a threat. He simply held it, its tip glowing a sinister, dull red, as if it were a natural extension of his hand. Your silence is all the confirmation I need. He stopped in front of Bess, the heat from the iron washing over her face in a wave. The question now is not what you were doing, but why. What was so important that the Lady Alianor would risk two of her most loyal servants? What was the outlaw Thorn doing in those tunnels that required such an elaborate diversion? He moved the iron rod slowly, tracing a line in the air, mere inches from her cheek. The heat was intense, promising unimaginable pain. You will tell me, girl. Everyone breaks. It is merely a question of time and of method. I have plenty of both. Your lady, I suspect, does not. He leaned closer, his voice a silken threat. Was it the water? Did he go to poison my men's supply? Or was it something else? Something he found in that hollow of his? Leave her be, Tom snarled, straining against his bonds, the ropes cutting into his wrists. She knows nothing. She's just a maid. I disagree, Jocelyn said calmly, his eyes still fixed on Bess, watching a single tear trace a path through the grime on her cheek. I think she knows everything. She is the mirror to the lady's soul, the keeper of her confidences. So, we will start with you. The iron moved closer, the heat becoming unbearable. What was Thorn's mission? Bess squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the terrifying image of the glowing metal, the cold face of the man holding it. She thought of Alianor, of her strength in the face of Roland, her compassion in the midst of starvation. She thought of the carved sparrow, a symbol of a hope that now felt very small and very far away. She prayed for the courage to remain silent. She prayed for a miracle, for a distraction, for anything to stop the inevitable descent into agony. The acrid smell of her own fear was thick in her nostrils, mingling with the scent of hot iron and Sir Jocelyn's faint, expensive perfume. The reckoning. Back in the great hall of Hawksmere, the miracle was that they were still alive, still breathing, still capable of hope. The news of the successful water purification had spread through the shivering, huddled mass of people like a sudden, warm gust of wind, a tiny but resilient flame ignited in the pervasive gloom. But it was quickly dampened, smothered under the heavier news of Tom and Bess's capture, and the whispered, terrified accounts from Will and Lenn about the green devil in the rock, stories that grew more monstrous with each retelling. Alianor stood before her people on the dais. They were packed together for warmth, a tapestry of gaunt faces and hollow eyes that reflected the flickering firelight and a deep, abiding fear. She saw the doubt there, the same corrosive doubt Ilara had given voice to. Roland kept us fed. The memory of those words was a ghost in the room, threatening to materialize again. She had to reclaim the narrative, now. She had to take this new fear and forge it into a weapon. People of Hawksmere. Her voice, though frayed with exhaustion, cut through the anxious murmurings like a clarion call. It was the voice that had said no to Roland, and it still held power. The bitter spring is sealed. The poison that weakened your bodies, that clouded your minds, and that sought to break your spirit has been stopped at its source. The land is healing. A ripple of cautious relief went through the crowd, a collective exhalation of a breath they felt they had been holding for weeks. This victory, she continued, her tone shifting to one of somber, grave respect, came at a cost paid in blood and courage. Good men were lost in the mine collapse. Others, like young Will, are wounded, fighting for their lives, and two of the bravest souls God ever put on this earth, our steadfast Tom and our kind-hearted Bess, are now prisoners of Sir Jocelyn de Mowbray. She let her gaze sweep over them, making eye contact with as many as she could. They are prisoners because they had the courage to be the decoy, to walk into the lion's den, so that Eamon Thorne could have the chance to save us all from the slow death Roland had planned for us. She let that sink in. Let them remember Bess's gentle hands tending their children, Tom's fair distribution of the last grains of barley. Let them feel the personal cost of this victory. I know you are afraid, she said, her voice dropping, becoming more intimate, a confession shared among family. I am afraid. We are besieged by a man who hides his ambition behind a cross and a legal writ, a man who would rather see us starve than acknowledge our right to live free on our own land. And now, we are told of a strange light in the earth, a sign we cannot understand. She paused, choosing her next words with the care of a mason setting the foundation stone of a cathedral. I do not know what it is, but I know this. For generations, the de Mowbray line has exploited this land. They have taken its ore and given back ruin. They have taxed its people into poverty. And now we learn they have poisoned its very lifeblood. Is it any wonder that the land itself might finally cry out? That it might show its displeasure in ways we cannot understand against those who have violated it? She was reframing the terror, masterfully weaving it into their existing narrative of oppression and resistance. It was no longer a random, malevolent force, but a direct consequence of the tyranny they had all suffered. The strange green light was not their enemy. It was a fellow victim, a powerful ally. That light was not for us, she declared, her voice rising again with passionate conviction, her fist clenched at her side. It was a warning to those who would defile this land. It was a sign that our cause is just, that God and the very earth we stand on stands with the righteous. Father Clement, standing beside her, saw his cue and raised his hands, his voice booming with a fervor that surprised even him. The lady speaks truth. As the psalmist says, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. The wicked have plundered it, raped it, and now it groans in travail. But we who seek to heal, to rebuild, to plant anew, we are its stewards, its protectors. Do not fear the land. Fear the men who would see you starve upon it. Fear the men who ignore its sacred warnings. The mood in the hall shifted palpably. The fear was still there, a tangible thing, but it was being transmuted, alchemized by Alianor's words and Clement's blessing into a fierce, defiant anger. They were no longer just starving victims awaiting their fate. They were defenders of a sacred trust, soldiers in a holy war against a profane enemy. The whispers now were not of doubt, but of grim resolution. The ghost of Roland's full larders was banished by the living spirit of their collective will. Later, in the relative privacy of the solar, Alianor carefully tended to Eamon's wound as Father Clement crushed herbs for a poultice. The adrenaline of the hall had faded, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. The room was cold, the fire too meager to chase the chill from the stone walls. You gave them a banner to rally to, Eamon said quietly, wincing as she cleaned the deep gash on his arm with a cloth dipped in watered wine. You took their terror, and you fashioned it into a shield. I have never seen anything like it. I used their fear, Alianor replied, her voice flat and drained. She looked at the bloodied cloth in her hand. Just as Roland used fear, just as Jocelyn is using it right now on Tom and Bess. I manipulate and I spin tales. Is there any true difference between us anymore? Eamon's good hand, rough and scarred, found hers, stilling its frantic movements. His touch was a grounding force. All the difference in the world, Alianor, he said, his voice low and intense. Roland used fear to break and control. Jocelyn uses it to conquer. You are using it to unite and to strengthen. You are not feeding them poison and calling it medicine. You are showing them the poison for what it is and leading them to the cure. You are asking them to be brave with you, not commanding them to be slaves for you. His faith in her was a lifeline thrown into the stormy sea of her doubts. She clung to it, her fingers tightening around his. "What did we wake up in that cavern, Eamon?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, the question she had been holding back all night finally escaping. He was silent for a long time, his gaze distant, seeing again the pulsating green deep in the earth. "I don't know," he admitted finally, "but it was old, older than the stones of this keep, older than the church. It has been sleeping under Hawksmere for a long, long time, and Roland's filth, his arsenic and his hate must have been seeping into its domain, its rest. I think our cleansing, our breaking of the rock, agitated it, woke it further. Is it a threat to us?" she asked, the core question. "Anything that powerful that we do not understand is a threat," he said grimly. "A spark near straw is a threat, but a spark can also light a fire to keep away wolves, to forge a sword." He met her eyes. "It may also be a weapon. Jocelyn is still out there with his army and his legalities, and he has Tom and Bess." The unspoken question hung between them, heavy and suffocating. What was the true price of their cleansed water? They had saved their people from a slow, silent death, but at what cost? Two of their own were in the hands of a ruthless enemy who now knew they had been tricked. And in saving themselves from one poison, they had potentially unleashed a different, more ancient and unpredictable one. The dawn was still hours away, but the darkness within the walls of Hawksmere and within Alianor's own heart had never been deeper. The price of water was proving to be everything they had.
Well, if that didn't ruin your sleep, my dears, nothing will. Our brave men return broken, trembling, haunted, each one carrying a sliver of darkness no poultice can draw out. Alianor stands before her starving people and forges fear into fire like a queen born of catastrophe, while Tom and sweet Bess endure the tender mercies of Sir Jocelyn's silver tongue and glowing iron. And then, oh, the delicious madness of it, the land itself stirs. A green pulse older than crowns, older than scripture, older than any scandal I've dared whisper to you. Something ancient has awakened beneath Hawksmere, and it is very much in the mood to be acknowledged. This, my loves, is where reputations shatter, alliances crumble, and the very earth decides whose side it's on. The price of water has been paid in blood, terror, and secrets ripped from trembling lips. But the final total? Oh, that has yet to be tallied. Until our next delightfully disastrous rendezvous, keep your appetites sharp, your suspicions sharper, and your confessions locked where even I cannot pry them loose. Oh, and wait! Before you drift away into whatever mischief awaits you tonight, do remember, my loves, that Lady Aurelia Ravenshade keeps her most intimate scandals, handwritten letters, and exclusive treasures tucked safely behind the velvet curtains of her private salon. If you wish to indulge yourself, you need only slip over to LadyAureliaRavenshade.com and claim whatever delights catch your wicked little eye.